Okay, I am admitting.
Folks are coming in.
Hey, welcome everyone. This is the June meeting of NWSOFA's Fiscal and Economic Issues Discussion Group. I'm Carl Falstick, one of your co-hosts. David Doney is your other co-host. And we also have Bill Davis, who's the chapter lead for NWSOFA, who will give us a bit of an introduction into what the heck is NWSOFA overall, before we'll then go back into what is the what's going on with the fiscal and economic issues. As some of you probably have paid attention, the economic news is mixed. Good news is that we've had a little bit better payroll job growth in the last few months than we had all last year, where payroll jobs were basically flat. And it's rumored that we have a deal with Iran that is going to allow crude oil to get out of the Strait of Hormuz, which seems to be bringing down the price of crude oil in the futures market, and also seems to be bringing down the price of gasoline locally. If we look at the AAA numbers, they've come down almost 50 cents in the last few weeks.
Would you like me to start my slides?
Sure, take it away, Bill.
Okay. Right. Just double checking. Carl, can you see my title slide?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to NWSOFA. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it stands for Northwest Suburbs Organizing for Action. We were originally located, when we started 14 years ago, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. About 6 or 7 years back, we joined Indivisible. And Indivisible has 2,900 chapters all across the country. Every one of those little gray dots is a chapter. So it's quite a huge organization. Tonight, we have Fiscal and Economics, our June review of May. So it's happening in June, but it's a May review. And this has been going on for 13 years running. It is one of our longest issue groups that we've had, doing it on a monthly basis. So the reason we exist is basically the same as it was when we started. When we started, we had 17 members. But these three reasons have been consistent. We want you to understand the facts. We want you to be able to sharpen your arguments in your discussions. And we want you to be able to communicate with your audience, whether that audience is a person having a cup of coffee across the table from you, or a Christmas or a Thanksgiving dinner with your family, or in a meeting, a general meeting with a large audience. We want you to be able to engage with purpose, connect, and inspire. So NWSOFA is founded on the twin snowflake principle. Those are snowflakes. They've grown quite a bit in the last couple of years. On the left-hand side, you can see our communications team. There are now 24 different ways that we send information out to you and receive information back from you. And you'll notice at the very bottom, we've added Substack and Discord both recently in the last 6 months. On the right-hand side are all of our issue teams. Up to January of last year, we only had 10. Those were the blue on the outside. But now we have a full 20 issue teams. New on the inside are all the new ones. And as you can see, as you go around from gun violence prevention, to healthcare, to immigration reform, to social justice, to stand with women. You can see right at the bottom there is fiscal and economics. And then election outreach, climate change, ROD, which is Restore Our Democracy on voting rights, and then ROD on disinformation. So these are the twin snowflakes that really drive our organization, communication side and issue side. Just to give you a little information about what we have done. Last year, we had over 600 Zoom in-person and events combination. This year, we're at a rate right now of 650 to 700. We had 62 last month. And right now, we have 17,000 members in the northwest suburbs where we started from, the land beyond O'Hare. And it also includes those in proper Illinois, Chicago, etc. And since the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of Zoom work, and that has created actually a larger membership of 27,000 across the US. Now, if you add those two together, you come up with about 34,000 members. We actually have about 44,000. We actually have about 40,000 members because about 4,000 of those are duplicates. So we don't do it alone. We have 30 all volunteer leaders that help with us on every issue and every communications team. As a matter of fact, there's no way we could drive these type of meetings or Zooms without this entire team here. And a huge thank you to all of those. Just to give you a little idea, just in the last few weeks, we've had 12 groups meeting, from coffee and conversation every morning at 9 to happy hour every Friday at 5. And then each group has its own presentation during the month. Some of them, like Sorting Soup, has 2 every week. So it's a huge organization with a lot of great programs that we put on. Just to give you a little impact, I said 64 events last month. We actually 62. I actually had 64. We produced 20 YouTube videos, and we're doing a live YouTube video of this right now. It'll be up on our website as we speak. We did 32 Substack articles. We had almost 3,000 new members join us. We had 18 newsletters that we sent out, 354 views of our YouTube videos, and we have almost 5,000 of you participate in those 64 events. So during tonight's presentation, you can ask questions in the chat, and at breaks the presenters will discuss. And since we have both Carl and David, if there's a question asked, one of them that's not talking will try to answer that. And then when we have the breaks, we'll do some overall. Now, to help us know what a question is, put in all caps question, so that we can identify them rather than just the chat. So with that, we're going to start our fiscal and economic May review that we're doing in June, 13 years running. To our understanding, we are the longest U.S. economic discussion program across the country. So with that, Carl, will you start the program?
You stop sharing? Okay.
It is all yours.
All right. So tonight we'll do an economic overview. We'll cover the labor market, inflation and wages, the Federal report on economic well-being, personal savings rate, as well as some other measures of economic activity, and give you some places where you can do some action. from an economic overview standpoint, after almost no job creation or very little job creation in 2025, we've actually had pretty solid job creation, payroll job creation in the last 3 months, according to the establishment survey. From when Trump took office in January 2025, wages are up 4.9% versus prices 4.7%. So wages are up a little more than prices since he took office. Stocks are up, both overall as well as this year. We had near record real net worth in the fourth quarter of 2025 for the bottom 50% in all their groups, and record real median household income in 2024, which may carry into 2025. That's something that Census Bureau does on a very delayed basis. They'll report 2025 numbers in September of this year. As we talked about, job creation was stagnant in 2025. Lower labor demand and reduced labor supply due to immigration restriction, firing federal workers, retiring baby boomers, cashing out because the stock market's doing okay for them, us, whatever, I guess I'm one of them. But we have 442,000 more unemployed than we did when Trump took office. And we have over 1 million fewer employed from the household survey than when Trump took office. So those are some negative numbers that we need to deal with. The unemployment rate is only up a little bit. It was 4.0% when Trump took office, and it's up to 4.3% now. The price level has gone up 2% between February and May due to the Iran war and the higher gas prices. And as of April, the Fed's preferred inflation measure which is core PCE inflation, was 3.3% versus a 2% target. And a large part of that, 0.8%, is due to Trump's tariffs. So there's some good things going on in the economy, but there's also some things that are not so good. And Trump had some economic promises when he came in. He was going to lower food prices right away, which hasn't happened. Grocery prices are up 3.2% since he took office. He was going to lower gas prices, which hasn't happened. They were up, as of last month, 46% versus when he took office. Electricity prices are up almost 10%. He wanted to revive the auto industry, and there's some indication that that's happening. Create manufacturing jobs. We're down manufacturing jobs since Trump took office. He wanted to raise the stock market, and the stock market is going up. Cut the debt with tariffs, and tariffs have been in and out of the economy, and there doesn't seem to be much progress in terms of getting the overall federal deficit down, and no progress in getting the debt down, as well as lowering the trade deficit. That is also not happening. Although it's down slightly, it was down slightly in 2025. The big act in 2025 was his tax acts and tariffs, a combination of the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the tariffs is a mixed bag. For people with lower income, over here on the left, we see that this has decreased the bottom 40% of people in their after-tax income. Whereas if we go to the people more on the right, the top quintiles, they are, not surprisingly, they're ahead as a result of Trump's actions, which was kind of what was predicted. And this does not include the increased cost of health insurance for about 20 million people who are receiving enhanced subsidies on the ACA exchanges that expired at the end of 2025. And average ACA out-of-pocket premium costs for that group going up somewhere between about $1,000 and $2,000 per household. So what do we see in terms of comparing the last Biden year versus the Trump years? The last Biden year, job creation per month was at 122,000 payroll jobs per month. The two Trump years, 1.5 Trump years, is 26,000 payroll jobs per month. The unemployment rate has gone up. The employment to population ratio, the percentage of prime age workers working, is about unchanged. Real wages are up a little bit. Inflation is higher now than it was when Trump took office. Real GDP per capita is up slightly. Net worth per household for the bottom 50% is up slightly. The personal savings rate is down as people are spending more of their money than saving it. Stock market increase is not as high as it was under Biden. Median sales price of homes sold is actually down a little bit, which might surprise a few of us. And the national debt is, of course, increasing. So let's talk about the labor market. Are there any questions on the economic overview before we move ahead?
Go ahead, Carl.
Okay. So every month, generally on the first Friday of the month, with a few exceptions, we get the monthly employment report for the prior month. So that monthly employment report is perhaps the most important economic news release. It contains two sets of data. One is payroll jobs, which is the establishment survey, and the other is the employment survey, which is more about the unemployment rate. And we see is that historically, we were having to add between 100 and 150,000 jobs to keep the unemployment rate from going up. Now, it seems to be substantially less than that. And some parts of the Fed estimate it may be close to zero. There are about 160 million payroll jobs in the US based upon that giant establishment survey. And the employers are supposed to report to the Bureau of Labor Statistics their jobs added, jobs lost, whatever, during the month. And they are not doing as well with that reporting as they were prior to the pandemic. Not sure why. But we get the job numbers that come in a given month. And then for 2 months after that, we'll get some revisions. And then we also, at the end of a year, in the following year, we'll get benchmark numbers based upon unemployment tax returns filed by employers, which is considered to be a even better source, more accurate source of jobs. It's just on a significantly delayed basis. Looking recently, we see that starting with just before the pandemic, we had 152 million payroll jobs. We then lost 22 million payroll jobs during 2 months of the pandemic, March and April. And then we started recovering under Trump, with a little hiccup in December of 2020. And then we continued to recover under Biden. And then when Trump took office again, things tend to flatten out. And although we've recovered a little bit under Trump 2, Trump 47, not nearly at the same rate that we were recovering prior, but we reached the pre-pandemic payroll employment peak in June 2022, which is good. And so we have more jobs, more payroll jobs than ever before. And this is just looking at the monthly change in jobs with a 3-month average. We see that the rate at which we were adding payroll jobs was going down in the last few months under Biden. And then under Trump, it actually went negative for a little bit before the recent 3 months where it's gone positive again. And we added 172,000 jobs in May, but we also revised the prior 2 months up substantially, which is how we got to that high number for the 3-month average. Where are we adding jobs? Well, a big one, which may be a one-time thing, is leisure and hospitality, which may be related to the World Cup, which is going on right now. So if that ends up being a one-time thing, we may see job growth slack off after the World Cup is over at the end of the summer. And then we've had private education, health services has been a big growth, as well as local government has been a source of job growth. And we see that we actually had a slight uptick in manufacturing jobs in the last month, as well as decent growth in construction. So we're getting into the summer. Not all bad. And if we look at where we've had the change in jobs since Trump took office, we see that healthcare and social assistance is the big category. Leisure and hospitality is the second biggest category. And we've had some gains in construction, other services, utilities, and then a whole bunch of areas where we've lost jobs. And then in the government, we've had local government, we've added jobs, but state and federal government, we've lost jobs. A lot of you should have received a link to this presentation, and we'll put a link in the chat so you can pull it up if you didn't. And job creation, again, is perhaps a key measure of strength. If we look at Obama's second term, we added 10 million jobs. In Trump's first term, we lost 2.7 million jobs with the pandemic. In Biden's term, we added 15 million jobs. So far in Trump's second term, we've added 733 payroll jobs. So combined Trump, we've lost a little over 2 million payroll jobs while Trump has been president. Not exactly a stellar performance. But hey, he's trying, right? And if we listen to him, we've got the world's greatest economy, so what can I say? And this is Bill Clinton spouting off about something that a number of us have reported on over the years, which is that job creation is generally done under Democrats, not Republicans. And so since 1989, when the first President Bush took office, America has created about 51 million jobs, 50 million under Democrats, and 1 million of them under Republicans. Just as another side note, the unemployment rate tends to go up under Republicans, with the exception of President Reagan, and it goes down under Democrats, although it was virtually flat under Carter, but otherwise it has gone down under every Democratic president, including Carter, but only slightly. And again, the unemployment rate is from that household survey of, I don't know, 50 to 60,000 households that are called every month. There's some overlap with prior months and some new people, so you get some of the same people, some new people. Unemployment rate measures slack. The U3 unemployment rate, which is what's generally reported, is an unemployment person is someone who has looked for work actively in the past month, is available for work, but did not do any work during the month. If they did any work at all, they might be a part-time worker or a full-time worker. And of course, the unemployment rate is the number of people unemployed versus the size of the labor force. As we said, the unemployment rate started at 4% under Trump and is now at 4.3%. By contrast, in his first term, it started at 4.7%. And when he left office, it was, I think, at 6.3%, but we'll see. Okay. 6.4% when he left office. So consistent with Republicans, the unemployment rate tends to go up between the beginning and the end of the president's term, although it was down fairly low for part of that term before the pandemic. And we see that there was a huge spike during the pandemic where the unemployment rate reported as high as 14.8%. In general, the household survey is saying that things have gotten worse off since Trump took office. The population has grown, but the labor force has actually shrunk. Number of people working or looking for work. The participation rate, people who are in the workforce, percentage of people who are in the workforce has gone down. The number of people employed has gone down by 1 million. The number of people unemployed is up by about 442,000. The unemployment rate is up almost 0.3%. And the people not in the labor force is up almost 3 million people. And the not in the labor force is mainly retired people, as a lot of us have aged out of the age where we want to be working. But it's also people who are in school, caregivers, disabled, housewives, whatever. The cumulative change in jobs and employment since Trump took office, we see is that the payroll jobs have gone up a little bit and then went up a little bit more in the recent months, where the employment level from the household survey has actually gone down substantially in the last few months. Prime age workers are generally considered the people between age 25 and 54. People are, generally speaking, no longer in school at those ages, and they haven't started to retire. And if we look at this, we see that the percentage of the percentage of the population, this population's employed, is about where it was pre-pandemic, a little over 80%, which is not bad. And if we look at job openings versus the number of people that are unemployed, we see that just prior to the pandemic, we had a little over one job opening per person unemployed. That crashed during the pandemic. And then in 2022, 2023, we actually had 2 job openings for everyone who was unemployed. And so it was a great time for people who were switching jobs and getting wage increases as a result of that. All of that's come back down. And so now we have basically about 1 job opening for every unemployed person. And the problem with this, as we've talked about in prior meetings, is the job openings aren't necessarily where the people who are unemployed are. That can be a question of skills. It can be a question of geography. For a while, fracking in the Dakotas was going great, but there weren't a lot of people up in the Dakotas, and they didn't have a lot of housing for the oil workers and such to go up there and freeze during the winters, because Dakotas are not exactly pleasant weather during the winters. So we have some questions about the labor market.
We do. We've got a bunch of good questions.
Great.
So I've been frantically answering as many as I can. Let's go up here. Going back toward the beginning, let's pick up a few here.
David, I have them in a email to myself. Would you like me to read them?
Yes, go for it.
All right. I tried to omit the ones that you've already answered. So let's see what we got. We have one from Robert. It says those jobs, those are private sector. If private sector, how many jobs created by ICE in the private prisons, I mean concentration camps?
You know, Carl shared a slide that showed the changes by sector, and it's not at the federal government level. We don't have. I'm not sure where the prison people would show up in that list, but it's not healthcare. And that's where most of the jobs are coming in. And it's also, it's funny that he asks that question, because the other sector that's been jumping is leisure and hospitality, which I don't think this is leisure and hospitality either. Can't make this stuff up, right? So I'm not sure where that resides. I'll have to look, but it's not going to make a dent in the larger picture. I mean, it's just not that many.
Okay. Joe has a question. What can we do to get higher tax rates for fat cats? The skewed income distribution is the problem. The recent cost of ICE, $70 billion, is more than the past year NIH budget, $48 billion.
Yeah.
Like Democrats.
That's it. That is your main strategy. We will raise, Obama and Clinton both raised taxes on rich people.
Right.
And Biden did not directly. He didn't do it through the income tax rates. We did get a stock buyback tax out of Biden. It was very small, 1%, but that's going to affect mostly rich people. But we didn't see a reversal of the Trump tax cuts for the upper incomes under Biden. So that was a missed opportunity that we had. Both Clinton and Obama were able to raise the taxes and the effective tax rate that the rich were paying. So we'll see about that. But Carl's right. Elect as many Democrats as you can, gives you the best chance.
And
Definitely.
in turn, we don't really have the ability at the federal level to tax wealth other than
States.
the estate tax. And
Yeah.
there the issue is that we've been going ahead and adding to increasing the level of estates that are not taxed.
Right.
And we need to reverse that, where every Republican tax bill goes ahead and adds to that. I can remember back when Reagan took office, and it didn't really go up much under Reagan, the amount of estates that were sheltered was about $1 million per estate. Now it's more like, I don't know, 17, 18 million, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and they also with estates will gross up the basis of the stock portfolio. So for example, if someone passes away and had bought Microsoft stock 20 years ago when it was a few bucks a share or whatever, I'm using just winging that one, but if they have stock that they bought when it was cheap and it's since appreciated tremendously, on the date of death, the stock is repriced to what it was on the date of death as far as the basis, so that you don't have to pay a capital gains tax on that. And so those assets pass to heirs,
Stepped up
without
basis.
having to pay that. That's called the step up in basis, and that allows the big estates to avoid paying capital gains taxes on a large portion of it. So we've created many ways for the rich to evade taxes, and it's not something we cover all the time. You hear me talk about it as the tax expenditure idea. So these are any kind of exemption, deduction, or preferential rate off of the regular income tax tables, and people don't believe how big they are. They figure, it's a loophole, it's only a little bit of money. The top 20% of income people get about $1 trillion a year per year in tax expenditures, as opposed to if they had to pay the rate table. So we don't even have to really raise the rates. If we just get rid of the exemptions, we could get very close to having a budget deficit that is sustainable indefinitely. You cut the deficit in half, basically, if you got rid of those exemptions, you got rid of those tax expenditures for that top 20% group. So next question.
Earl's question: how many of these full-time jobs pay only minimum wage?
I was surprised that the minimum wage is just not the federal minimum wage. 30 states have higher minimum wages than that. So the federal minimum wage is it's like 1 million people get paid the federal minimum wage or less out of 160 that are in that payroll number. So less than 1% of people are getting the minimum wage. And the Democrats will often have that as an election issue. We need to remember that the states are doing a very good job of raising the minimum wage, and we don't need to make it a federal issue. It's 1 million people, which is not a small number, but it isn't. It's really being handled by the states without having to spend a lot of political capital on that at the at the presidential level, let's say presidential campaign level. But it sounds good. I mean, if you say, we want to raise the minimum wage, I mean, that's a fair point, and that's a good thing to say. It's just understand the economics of it is it's just not that many people are at that federal minimum wage anymore.
Okay, and Earl has a second question.
How many charge for that? He's got to donate a quarter.
It's a 2-for-1.
Right.
Yeah. How many jobs have been lost due to restrictions on employing non-U.S. citizens?
Restrictions. Okay, so we've got the way I answered the question in the chat was just to say that we had almost no job creation in 2025. It was like 10,000 a month, which is like pathetic, and it's like I have to check it, but it's like the worst other than in recessions. I mean, it's extremely bad job creation. And a big reason for that is because we blocked immigrants.
Yes.
And the other part is tariffs. We had some decent job creation early, right at the end of the Biden and early the first month of Trump. And then when he announced the tariffs, the job creation basically flattened. But it was also because you started getting, starting to lean on immigrants more too, and you started to see the enforcement. So it's, I think that's it. That's why it's a big reason why we have slow job creation until very recently.
Okay. And the last question that I currently have from Robert is a question to anyone. So this is, did the 200 plus or minus bill get passed for DHS?
I don't know what that is, so I'm going to ask for help.
Yes, Robert, please raise your hand maybe. That would help. We'll see if we get a response.
I mean, is that the 70 million that got put in for ICE and such?
That was, yeah, here, we'll ask Robert really quick here. Okay, Robert. Can you clarify?
I'm in the yard working. No, that had to do with the recently the Republicans were trying to pass a $200 billion um, bill to fund DHS more, even more.
Yeah.
That was the bill I was referring to. It's the reconciliation bill.
Okay.
I did.
I'll have to look into that. We'll take a look at that. Thank you. I just haven't yet.
All right. Thank you, Robert. And that was the last question that I have at this time.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there were several other ones that I've answered in the chat, and I've included
Yes.
images in there that you guys can click on and save if you're interested. But there was one around kind of what are the income brackets that get you into the different groups, like the first quintile, so that first 20%, the next 20%. So there are a couple of ways of answering that question, and so I've given you some definitive sources on that. And then there was one on, what was the other one? There were a couple of interesting ones here. We got the minimum wage one. I think we're most of the way there. Though there was a COLA question, like what's the COLA going to be? And the estimates are somewhere around 4%. I mean, the inflation rate right now, we're going to cover here in a second, is over 4%. But it wasn't that high earlier in the year. So they have a formula that they use, and if the CPI inflation, that's not the exact index they use a different one that tends to get at what the elderly spend on, and so it's a slightly different index. But if the inflation is over 4% for much of this year, then you're going to get a COLA that's around 4%. And so that's a good rule of thumb for now until we get later in the year and we see how long this gas price thing stays up. So I think that's got us covered, I think. And if you're interested, there's some more links in the chat, but I think we're current.
Okay.
So I guess back to Carl, if Carl wants to proceed with, he's going to start the next section and then I'll jump in.
Okay. So we see that gas prices, which were relatively steady in Trump's first year, though they came down right before Thanksgiving in 2025 and early 2026 before they started going up even before the war. And then with the war, they took off like crazy. So when Trump started, the national average gas price was $3.11. And recently it's been $4.15. I think it might have been $4.04 or something today. So it's still up about $1 a gallon versus when Trump took office. And remember, of course, that he was going to bring gas prices down, not up. And if we look at consumer expenditures on energy, we see that the bottom 20% spend a substantial portion of their income on energy. The top 20% spend a much lower percentage of their income on energy. And it's between gasoline, electricity, and then natural gas, like in my condo in Chicago, which is substantial expense for the condo association because we've got a steam boiler. The good news is that, well, electricity is up a little. Natural gas is not up very much. Now gasoline is up substantially. I have to look forward to the next pizza party out in the suburbs so I can fill up my tank with relatively cheap gas. Because the gas prices out in the suburbs by the pizza place are substantially lower than they are here at the lakefront. If we look at overall price levels with the CPI, and we see we're short a couple of months of data from when the government shutdown occurred, we see that there was fairly solid inflation going on until we started the war, and then there was big inflation with the war, especially with gas prices. And if we look at the 12-month change in the CPI, blue is the overall CPI, reddish is the all items less food and energy. We see that we were at a little around 3%, a little less than 3% last year, first part of the year. Then we actually got down fairly low in the first couple of months of this year before the war in Iran caused gas and then other prices to explode because, well, food moves via refrigerated trucks, which use diesel fuel. And so there's a lot of indirect costs as a result of gas and diesel costs going up. And if we look at the different components of inflation, what we see is that, I'm looking at the bottom, my alcohol has had relatively little inflation, 2.1% year over year, versus some other items like airfares, which is going to be directly affected by fuel prices, are up 26%, gasoline's up 40%, energy overall is up 23%. Food at home overall is at 2.7%. Fruits and vegetables is the big piece of that. And again, that's where you have to refrigerate a lot of the produce. And food away from home is a little higher than inflation than food at home. So inflation was about 3% when Trump started and was falling. There was a break with the shutdown, which makes these numbers a little bit less reliable, but hey, they are what they are. And then this year with the war, prices have gone up substantially, not just in gas at the pump. Although my tomatoes were not bad this week at Jewel, 69 cents a pound, so I'll take that. Versus, I think I might have mentioned last month, I was running into tomatoes at $3 a pound, which was not making me happy for my BLTs. So Trump's tariffs are adding to inflation. And again, this core inflation rate is, I think, this is PCA. Okay, these are PCE core inflation. Which is at 3.2% year over year. which again is a lot more than the 2% the Fed would like. But it's not the 4+% that we're getting with the gas prices. And PCE inflation, we've gotten CPI inflation for May reported already. PCE inflation will probably be reported either next week or early the following week, because it tends to take a lot longer to get that. So as we said, the PCE core inflation is the Fed's preferred measure. We see that overall PCE inflation, including fuel, is up 3.8% year over year, 0.3% in the prior month versus 3.3% for the core inflation. Again, both of those are much higher than the Fed would like, and we'll see what the Fed does this week with their new Fed chairman. Or will they do anything with interest rates? What are they meeting, tomorrow and Thursday this week? Anybody know? I know they're meeting this week, but I'm not sure which days. So we've got, since before the pandemic, wages have outgrown inflation. There was a bit of a blip during the pandemic that we laid off with the 22 million jobs lost in March and April of 2020. A lot of those were low wage workers, and therefore we took them out of the average. And so the average wages of the people who were still working grew substantially. And that's what you see this little blip here at the beginning. And then you see that it started to go down before it kept climbing. But since before the pandemic, wages have gone up faster than inflation. Since Trump took office, wages have gone up, as we looked at a slide earlier, a little faster than inflation. This past month, inflation actually went up a little higher than wages. And this is what I'm talking about, the 22 million people who lost their jobs during the 2 months created a false peak in wages, because we lost a lot of low wage workers lost their jobs, and so they were taken out of the average. And as they got their jobs back, the average went down a little bit before it then started to grow. But what we see is that basically versus pre-pandemic levels, real wages are higher than pre-pandemic. Although again, real wages have come down a little bit in the last few months. So according to the Congressional Budget Office, or the CBO, households had more purchasing power in 2023 than in 2019, which was Trump's, greatest economy ever in his first term, if we recall what he was claiming. So, and again, the green shaded for households in every quintile. the share of income required to pay for their 2019 consumption bundle decreased on average because income grew faster than prices did over that 4-year period. The top quintile did best, but everybody did better. If we look at the long view on real wages, what we see is that real wages were growing through about 1973. And then due to a recession and other things, real wages shrank and continued to shrink and into the 1990s. Though I will point out they actually went up under Carter. But then this century, real wages have tended to go up again. Now, a couple of things happened. Now, my dad worked for Caterpillar, and we used to do driving vacations, and road construction was all Caterpillar equipment back in the early 60s, early mid 60s. And then we started to see Komatsu equipment coming in. So we were getting international competition, which was putting pressure on wages of Caterpillar workers and number of Caterpillar workers in the US. The other thing that happened starting after the Civil Rights Act of 64 is that many more women entered the workforce. They went from about 30% of the women in the workforce back prior to the Civil Rights Act of 64, peaking at about 60% by the end of the 2000s. And so as we added a bunch of people who didn't have a lot of work experience, the average wages tended to go down a little bit as well. But then again, starting at about 2000, average wages started to go back up again. So what happened between the 70s and 90s, loss of manufacturing, which is sort of true. Manufacturing employment did decline overall. Although there was a substantial drop in manufacturing employment in the 2000s. Interestingly, if you go back and look at it, manufacturing employment grew under Democratic presidents and shrunk under Republican presidents. Not quite sure why. Just lucky, I guess. Declining unions, private sector unions were less of a factor. As again, I talked about the international competition of Komatsu and international competition to Caterpillar. If we see it in cars, we used to have Ford, GM, and Chrysler, and now we've got Toyota and Honda and Nissan and Volkswagen and a lot of other foreign competition that's coming in, and a lot of those shops are non-union. That also includes globalization. We had, again, starting in the 70s, we started to see this robots go into factories. Just as an aside, the Caterpillar plant in Joliet, which peak employment in the 1970s was about 7,000 employees, and its depth in about 1980, 81, they were down to about 700 employees. And when they came back, it came back to about 2,000 employees because of the automation in the factories. So they were manufacturing more product, but with a much reduced workforce. Okay, so we look at under Trump, changes in household financial measures. Gas prices are up substantially. Stocks are up substantially. Electricity is up about 9%, 9.5%. Hourly wages are up a little bit over almost 5%. Inflation's up a little bit less than wages. Talked about that. Rent is up a little bit less than the overall inflation rate. And groceries, food at home are up, but not as much as wages or the overall inflation rate. Again, the gas prices are the big driver of inflation. And Senator Elizabeth Warren put this out, and healthcare ACA premiums are about 220% higher than they were. Tariffs are costing families about $2,500 per year, although I'm not sure what tariffs, whether he's got enough tariffs in place to do that. Gas prices are up. Electricity prices are up. So we see that there's a number of things that are going that have not helped the common worker.
Shall we pause here, Carl, for questions and
Yeah, let's pause
take a
for
break
questions.
and then take
Yeah.
a break? All right. So we have a few here. Should our moderator help us here?
That would be great.
Yeah, I can give you the ones that I put down because the
Excellent.
ones that you've answered, I don't always capture because you've answered them in the chat.
Now,
So-
go ahead. I will go back to those. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. Earl's question, does energy inflation include utility prices?
Yes.
Energy does. Obviously, it's not captured in the gas, it's captured in the electric, or it's captured in natural gas. And again, natural gas prices in the US are not up substantially in this year with the war. The rest of the world is seeing substantial increases in natural gas prices, but we are not.
In general, because we've had a few questions around what's in or not in the inflation number. Just about everything you can think of is in the inflation number except for interest costs, like financing costs. So mortgages, interest on your credit cards, that sort of stuff is not in there. But anything else, healthcare, there was a question around healthcare, that's in there, although it's not a particularly good measure. I think they should probably get a better one. But there are, it's generally whenever you get that sense of they're not including this item in inflation, chances are they are. Again, unless it's a financing thing, it's related to interest, it's probably not in there.
Right. I believe you answered Gretchen's question on fertilizer prices for farmers. It says, how have fertilizer prices for farmers changed?
Yeah, and understand I'm giving some pretty quick answers here. Some of these pictures, I asked the AI, basically the question, the Copilot AI, what you're asking me, and then I'm including the summary that they're doing. And then if they have other sources, Gretchen asked for sources. Then I went to the sources and pasted those in here as well. So there are a couple examples, but it looks like the prices of the fertilizer tend to be natural gas is one of the biggest inputs in fertilizer, believe it or not. There's an industrial process, I forget the name of it, it's been around for 100 years or so, where they take natural gas and they turn it into ammonia, and then they make ammonia fertilizer with it. Among other things, there's other inputs that go in there, but it's basically you connect the fertilizer plant to the natural gas line, you bring in that as an input, and there you go. So as Carl mentioned, natural gas prices haven't gone through the roof, but still fertilizer costs did in 2026. So you'll see a chart toward the bottom where the prices had spiked in 2021 and 2022, and then they fell back to a more normal level. And then by the end of 2025, but then in 2026, they spiked up again. And I'm not clear on those, but I put a link in there called the 2026 spike toward the bottom of the chat, about 80% of the way down. And if you're interested in that item, we've got that there. I can't help you with your obsessions around screw worms. A couple people seem very intense on screw worms. I don't want them anywhere near me. I will agree on that. We don't want them on the call or anywhere near us. They are nasty little buggers. So yeah, but it is part of why. Isn't that? I think it doesn't say it here in the quotes, but I think, is that one of the reasons why we're having trouble? Why there's such a low crop, or not crop isn't the right word, but we've got a very low count of steers, of cows, I think. And I don't know if it's that or other reasons, but yeah, I don't. Just the thought of a burrowing creature is just so nasty. I don't even want to think about it. So,
Like scabies. Ooh.
oh yeah, it's so
Yeah,
bad.
just be like President Trump and eat your steaks well done, and you won't have to worry about them.
There you go. There you
But
go.
if you eat them well done, you eat the worm if it's in there.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, but it's dead. It's dead at that point.
You're
Still,
grossing me out. You're grossing me out. Yes.
sorry, I will refrain from grossness.
Thank you. All screwworm discussion should be tabled for later. All right.
And that's for at the table, correct. And just so you know, it is in Texas, because yes, it did manage because of all the cutting of, priority aspects. So it is in Texas. So Brenda has got a question. It says, when you talk about wages and inflation, you fail to capture the increase in health insurance. Doesn't this reflect an actual loss in wages?
So it's a good question. I mean, there is a healthcare, it's included in the inflation measure. And I have to compare it against this Kaiser information I gave here, but premiums on, and there's a great link in there for the Kaiser study they do every year on health insurance. And it's really it's surprisingly interesting in terms of how much money it is per family. It's like 26 grand for a family, but like 2/3, it's into the employer side, not the ACA side. It's about the employer health market. So it's like 150 million people are in there. That 160 million number we give you for insurance is, most of them are covered by a company plan. And there is it's like 26,000 now for a family. And corporations cover a pretty high percentage of that. So to the extent that they're doing that, in other words, paying for a benefit, they are not giving you wages. So that's something to think about. So there's some truth to what's said there. Is if health insurance is getting more expensive, isn't that slowing down or hurting you on the wage side? And the answer is yes. If somehow, I guess in theory, if somehow health insurance were not an issue, if that were free somehow, then, if the robots did it all for us, then, we should theoretically see faster wage gains because corporations don't have to pay for that benefit. But when you look at your total compensation, so including the amount of money that corporations are covering for you on the health insurance, that 2/3 or 3/4 of the health insurance that they cover, it's just not going to show up on your paycheck, but it's going to be part of your total compensation. And a lot of companies will give you a report of your total compensation, and you'll be shocked at how big the health insurance part of it is.
Well, I believe that was the last one. So unless you want to go over some of the other ones you've already answered, David?
No, I think we're good there. Let's take a break. Let's resume at 8:17 or so, take 7 minutes or so, and then we'll get to the Federal Reserve report on the economic well-being, and then also a couple of other items, the personal savings rate, which has been just tanking, and then other measures and news. But that personal savings rate gives you an idea of how much is Trump really costing us? You know, how much more expensive are things really? And I had a chance to really dig into that and analyze it better than I did a month or two ago, and have some good stuff there for you. So anyway, let's take a break, and at 8:17 we'll resume.
Okay. And if people have questions, we'll go ahead and address them now. If people want to speak up, raise your hand, whatever.
Okay, Carl has opened the barn door. He has said, if you have questions, raise your hand. Do not see any at the moment, Carl.
Yep. Well, then I'll make a quick run down to the hall of the restroom and
Oh,
be
now
back in a couple
you
minutes.
can't run yet. Robert just put his hand up.
Okay, Robert, what's your question?
All right, Robert.
Are any accountants in the room? You need to speak to an accountant tomorrow.
Oh, might have to speak up just a little bit more, Robert.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Not hearing
Very
you, Robert.
faintly, very faintly.
Oh, let me do something here. How about now?
Better.
I can't hear any. My phone is really messing up a lot lately. I
Okay.
wonder. I'm looking for an accountant. I'm looking for an accountant. If anybody's on an accountant, I would like to get some free advice tomorrow for about 10 or 15 minutes. If
Was
anybody
was
wants
that
to
your question, Robert?
private message me. Thanks.
What type of accounting? Bookkeeping, tax?
Oh, Robert, if you can hear me, what type of accountant are you looking for? Let's see if he hear. There you go.
Hello?
Yes.
I can't hear anything with my phone. That's why I'm not
Okay.
on it much.
It's okay, Robert.
I
All right. We are having some technical difficulties with Robert's phone and him hearing.
Debbie, I believe that Robert's question, I saw it in another text today, has to do with a new corporation EIN number. How long should it take to get an EIN number? And
Okay.
I believe that he filed for one and then it got rejected, and he's trying to open a new business. So he needs someone to guide him through the process.
Okay.
Or
Well, since we've reduced the support on the IRS, you get EIN numbers by calling into their tax helpline. And I was trying to get the name associated with my condo association's EIN number last week. And I was only on hold for 4 hours before they finally hung up on me without giving me an answer.
Ah,
So yeah,
that's all.
his saying they don't answer, yeah, that's a big problem. I did speak briefly to one person who couldn't help me and then tried to transfer me to somebody else who never picked up after over an hour on hold.
Yeah. Kathy in the chat said an EIN is issued immediately, and Robert said they don't answer. Go figure. What you just talked about. You don't get an answer to your question. Okay, Kathy says you can get an EIN online, fill out a form, and presto, you get a letter generated immediately. I've done it twice in the past couple of years, so it's an idea. She's looking for the website.
Hopefully that'll work.
Yeah. And Kathy, just to let you know, Robert is in Illinois.
Debbie, I'm going to share my screen here.
Okay, no problem.
Can you see that, Debbie?
I can see it, just needs presentation mode.
All right. I clicked it, so hopefully it is going there.
Okay,
Did it make it?
not yet. No, we still see the slides to the left.
All right, let me hit it.
There you go. Now it did.
Aha. Okay.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't just lagging, it
Surprise.
was I missed it. All right. Swing and a miss on the mouse. All right, so let us resume here with the Fed report on economic well-being. And this one's kind of got some interesting stuff on it. It's from it's annual, and they are talking about the latest data is 2025. So it's not like an up to the minute sort of thing. But there's a really interesting observation here that Paul Krugman picked up on some time ago, and gets to this idea of affordability and people's perception of the economy. People tend to think their own finances are okay. And this number since 2017 has been pretty stable. This top line here going, it went from 74 to a peak of 78 and is now back to 73. 73% of people think that their own finances are okay. But when you ask them about the local economy or you ask them about the national economy, the numbers just crater. 73% saying my finances are fine, but they think that the national economy being good or excellent is only 26% of the people think that. So there's this giant disconnect between what people perceive of their own position versus what they think the national position is. And Krugman was talking about that, saying, it's a big hobby among economists trying to figure out why people are so negative on the economy. They were negative on it in the Biden era, and they're still negative on it. And because it used to be much closer, the numbers that we're seeing in the economy with inflation and unemployment were associated with much happier people in the past. Once you got to 2021 and that inflation and the post-COVID era started, though, the numbers just disconnected completely. So this is an interesting observation. And you can see back in 2018 and 19, the numbers were much closer, right? So it's really been it's the pandemic that seemed to break that historical relationship. And you could take these numbers probably back a lot more years and they'd be close together going back a ways. So it's interesting to see that. We can look at it by different group as well. The questions change a little bit, but this is doing okay or living comfortably, but this is by race or ethnicity. So it's very also proportional to income here. So Asians have the highest median household income in the US, white next, Hispanic, and then African American. And you can see the happiness is based on that. To a large extent, the Asian and whites are the happiest, and the Hispanic and the African Americans less so. Very proportional to income. Here is where people see their financial challenges coming from. And so in the last couple of years, it's been price increases has been the big one, as you might imagine. Inflation is top of mind for people. The extent of their retirement savings, making ends meet, you can read this going to the end. Finding a job has not been the major concern. It's been prices, which makes sense because the unemployment rate has been historically low for the past few years. And then there's minor or major concern. So, 40% almost, 35 to 40%. Minor concern, 56 to 53, major concern in those years, and so on and so on. So, but this is the one that seems to be the major concern is higher than all the others. The other ones tend to have a little bit more blue relative to the total. So most people, when they talk about pricing, they see it as they're seeing it as a major concern. And here's another more detail on that basically says the level of satisfaction is proportional to income and age. And so doing okay or living comfortably by demographic characteristics. And so as income goes up, people get happier, shocking. There's the change since the last year, change since the pandemic. The age, as age goes up, people usually have saved more and are in a better financial position. And then disability status, whether you're in a metro or a non-metro, the city people are a little happier. There's higher incomes in the city generally. And then in neighborhood, whether it's a lower moderate income neighborhood or a middle or upper income neighborhood, people, again, it's income dependent to see how happy people are with their own situation, which should not be a surprise. So the interesting thing is this break right here after 2019. And as we get into the pandemic, why is it that people, even though their views of their own situation haven't changed very much, they became very pessimistic on the rest of the world, the local economy and the national, not rest of the world, but local and national economy just dropped off and has stayed down. There's been this gap has persisted. 2022 was the worst Biden year. That's when we had the highest inflation, where it peaked at around 9%. And that's part of why that gap was probably so big, but it narrowed a little. But inflation is not, until this most recent inflation just wasn't that big a deal in 2023 and 2024. It was on its way down and was fairly low by then. So it's still a mystery that people are wrestling with, but I think a lot of this is media. The negativity that's in the news, everything's a crisis. Depending on what day of the week it is, it's either an immigration crisis, a housing crisis, an inflation crisis. There's always something. So that's how they get eyeballs. So any questions on that?
Not at this time that I can see.
All right, cool. So the personal savings rate, this discussion is around, if people are saving a lot less, how much of it is because prices went up versus them buying more stuff? And when I analyzed this a couple months ago, I did it wrong. So I'm going to correct that. And I will give you the bottom line first, and then I will show you, at least give you a quick tour of the math, although it's not easy. And the math does take a little while to get your brain around. And so if you're interested, you got a month to figure it out. But I will give you the bottom line so at least you know what that is. So this is, and a couple of these slides I've edited a little in the last couple of days, so you may have a version of this that's slightly older. I will cut and paste these into the chat when I get toward the end of the section. But the basic idea is that in January, when Trump started, January of 2025, the savings rate was about 5.1%. So 5% of people's disposable income they could save. And the definitions are here. So your income, and I'll show you the aggregate, the math in a minute, but the income minus taxes is disposable income. And then disposable income minus whatever you spend on, that's outlays, whatever you're buying is the savings. And the savings divided by the disposable income is this number. So for households across the US economy, it was 5.1, and it's been cut roughly in half. It's 2.6. And what that translates to is 5.1% is about $9,200 of savings for the average household in a year. And in April of 2026, that was back in January of 25, now that's down to about 4,700 a household. So this difference is 4,500 less that people are able to save. And the question is, all right, how much of that is higher prices? How much of that is because people are just on a buying spree? And it's about 60-40. 60% of the decline is in savings is because prices are higher, so they're spending more on the same stuff. And then also, though, people are buying a lot more stuff, and so that's the other 40% of that decline is that. And so if you take the 60% higher prices, that's about a 2,600 hit per household from those higher prices. So tariffs, gas, et cetera, all the things that Carl and I talk about, you can kind of roll them up into that number. So how much is Trump really costing the average household? And the answer is about $2,650. And the average household, depending on which part of the distribution you're in, did get a tax cut, which would offset. Well, the tax cut's even built into this, meaning if you got a tax cut, it's included in these numbers. The tax amount is there. They were paying less taxes than you would otherwise. So this is really the impact of Trump's policy, even including the tax cut, is about $2,650 per household. And then people have chosen to spend more, and that gets you from the $2,650 to the $4,500. So that's the bottom line. And now I'll show you where the math comes from, because we nerd out on this stuff. But you'll at least be able to see it. So this is what the average household budget looks like writ large in the US economy. And so compensation, proprietor's income is like the business owner. Rental income is a landlord income. And then if you have assets and so you're getting interest or dividends, that's this number. And this is per household, so this is just dollars. This is, I'll give you the aggregate numbers, which are divided by 131 million households to get this. I'll give you those numbers in a second. But when you go down the line, you've got government transfers, so Social Security, Medicare, and all that. And then less what people pay into that. So they pay into Social Security, they pay a premium for Medicare. Less the taxes, get you to disposable personal income, less outlays, and that's the 8,700. And here, that's adjusted for inflation on the prior slides. That's the 9,000 number, and there's the 4,500 number. So the personal savings has just come down, and here are the rates. It's this 91.56 divided by 178 would give you the 5.1, and 46.69 divided by 179 is the 2.6. So that's how you do the math at an individual household level. This is an average, so remember, averages are distorted by some of the richer people. This isn't a median. I don't have that data, but this still gives you a sense of kind of where things are at in the economy. And so that's been cut in half approximately, costing people, what do we have, about $2,650 a household. Now, when you look at the savings and you look at the changes in these things, so from January 2025, so let me use this for a second now. This is the same slide I just showed you, only this is the aggregates for the economy. So this is in billions of dollars. So same idea here, but these are just in billions. The other slide I showed you was divided by 131 million households. So you can see what it looked like per household, but you get the same math at the bottom. These are the numbers I'm going to show you in the chart, in this chart. Personal savings adjusted for inflation, 1199. So this is 1.2 trillion. These numbers are annualized. So they figure households can save about $1.2 trillion. That was in January 2025, and now that number is half that, 612. And here are the reasons. Compensation went up a little, government transfers went up a little more, other income came down. So those other categories of income beside compensation came down. Taxes are a little bit down, or actually a little bit up. The tax cuts are helping, so they are, but not a lot. And then the outlays, people are spending more. This is where I get the 60 and the 40 number. So, and this is the complicated part. By adjusting the January number for inflation, you're able to see how much more of the outlays was because of actually buying more stuff. I've taken inflation out of the equation essentially, and that tells me 643 billion more stuff being bought. And when I look here, if you look at the difference between, here's April of 2026, that 22 trillion, almost 23 trillion that people spent versus what they were spending in January of 2025, that difference is more like 1.5 trillion or so. What is it? 21.2, 22.8. So 643 is buying more stuff out of that 1.5 total. The other part is the inflation. I know that's confusing, but you've got a month to absorb that. But I know that 643 is how much more stuff people bought. And I know what the nominal, this difference unadjusted for inflation, how much more they're spending. I know the difference is the inflation effect. And so that tells me, if the inflation effect is 931, the change is 643, which is the more spending, buying more stuff. This is 60%. That's 40% of the 1.5 total. There it is. Here's a breakdown that the AI uses to explain it, so you can see where some of these numbers come from. So there's the difference in the outlays, the spending, 1.5. The price effect is 930. The quantity effect, buying more stuff, is 644. And so this is the 60, this is the 40, and the other stuff is extra. Oh, here are the percents right here. 930 divided by 1575. 645 divided by 1575, there's your 60/40. So sorry, I'm giving you some headaches. Some of you are probably bored out of your mind with that, but there's the numbers. What this tells us is the prices going up, stuff becoming more expensive is about 2650. That's tariffs, that's gas, that's all in on inflation. And then the rest is people just spending more, buying more stuff. So I'm sure some heads have exploded. This is the chart you don't have. And so this shows the whole, sort of walks across the whole calculation. This chart, this part of the chart you guys already had. This part's the new part that shows that inflation adjustment in it. I'm going to cut and paste this right now into the chat before I forget, so you have it. Everything else in here you have in your presentation. So bear with me while I copy that and paste it over into the chat. And then I will get back to this. So now you guys have that other chart in there if you are interested. But what this tells me is, there's all these estimates. Like Carl shared that chart earlier on the Senator Elizabeth Warren had shared, that showed how much Trump is costing people. I would not expect her to share this. This is a little complicated, but a simplified version that says, between the tariffs and the inflation and other things, you're looking at a 2650 hit. That's even after Trump's tax cuts. And it doesn't include, built into that also is this idea that there are probably around 20 million households that have to pay about $1,000 more for their health insurance, because those expanded subsidies for health insurance were not, they weren't extended by Trump. And so that cost about, 20 million people, about 1,000, and that's going to be included in here. But this is the inflation adjustments over here. Here's that I bought more stuff thing here, and that gets you down to that number. So it starts with the nominal amount, does an inflation adjustment, and then it works its way down all the way there. So this kind of chart's called a waterfall for those of you that don't do data viz for a living. And it shows the categories, but this is complicated no matter how you think about it. I wanted you to have the math because you're like, where did Dave get these numbers? They're there. But it's a bit difficult to try to break out the inflation and the sort of buying more stuff, but that's how you do it. All right, so I can't imagine we had questions on that, but if we did, anybody's willing to ask, if like, what are you talking about? So how do we do, Debbie? Anybody have a question?
Well, I did not see any. I did not. Hopefully I did not bypass. I try not to do that.
Their eyes probably glazed over like, Dave, you're killing me with all this math. I just wanted you to have it. You can study it if you're inclined, but it's 60-40. 60% is prices, 40% is stuff. Now we
just saw one in the chat about what stuff is being bought.
Yes, Susan just put that in the chat, which is what I was just going to say, is that, is it fair to say it's T's fault? That was from Joe, but Susan is saying what stuff is being bought? Question, what is the stuff that is being bought?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't have a good answer for that. If you look at the jobs numbers, like where the jobs are being created, it's in healthcare. And so people spending more on healthcare perhaps, or buying more services. I think leisure, you're also seeing a big increase in the number of leisure jobs. And so I think people are spending on their vacations, additional services. So it's a lot of, I suspect it's on the services side. It's in the leisure area. They're doing trips. But that's a good question. I'll research that. I'll give you an answer because I'm curious too. I don't know where they are spending it.
Satya said she has a question in there, but I have to find it unless she can repost it, Satya. If you can repost it, I will ask it. And Shannon has her hand up. Would you like to take a hand raise?
Yeah, we can have somebody speak out. We're doing it all through the chat, but there's nothing wrong with people talking or asking a question.
All right, Shannon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure your numbers take into account people who had
You're breaking
18 years ago to 20 years ago, and we are retiring early because all the stuff happening with different kinds of funding and things. It's like for myself, it turns out to be better for me to retire early, clear out assets, and then my daughter will be able to get financial help when so I needed to clear out my assets for this year so that when she applies for her financial aid for her freshman year in college next year, I will have like an income of 1,000. So
Carl and I will always take donations.
And a number of my friends are retiring early. I mean, like almost everybody I know that I spend significant time with is retiring early, like, you know, as early as 55. I'm 62.
Yeah, I mean, if the stock market is jumping like it has been,
and
it makes
I'm not sure that these numbers. If you're wondering what's all the spending and income happening, I don't know what the population is that's actually retiring and doing things like what I am doing. So I don't know if you took that into account.
A big challenge for early retirees is health insurance costs.
Were you able to hear me?
Shannon, can you hear us?
I said a big challenge for early retirees is health insurance costs especially until you hit 65 and qualify for Medicare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shannon, can you hear us?
Okay, now I hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you're getting some answers. Hold on. Okay, David and Carl.
Yeah. I mean, if people are retiring early, if they have the capability to retire early, some of that is because the stock market has more than doubled since 2019. I mean, that's helping a lot of people go into retire. Well, it should, in theory, help people retire earlier if they choose to do that. And at 62, you can start getting Social Security. And so that's another aspect of what might help people. But that's always been the case. So it isn't that that's something new and different. The 62 thing hasn't changed in a while. So it'd be the stock market that is helping people do that. But
No, it's not stock market.
Yeah.
It's we are situating ourselves with our houses, and I'm just going to live off of Medicaid, 30,000 a year. I'm just going to live off of Social Security, which is about 30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And no stock market involved.
Okay.
Yeah, just
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
it just turns out it's insurance, because doing this early, what triggered it was I did lose my insurance from the ACA. I lost all that, and I decided that I was going to go without insurance, but then some stuff happened.
Yeah.
So I got on insurance, but I'm on Medicaid, and my daughter's on Medicaid. And so we're on Medicaid, and if your house is paid for and your car, you don't have any expenses, you can live quite comfortably on the Social Security check if you have everything already paid for. And also I have, like, my mother's 82 and she's still working, and
Right,
she brings home the groceries. Yeah.
No, good. No, good. Let's move on, but thank you for that. All right. So were there any other questions in that section?
Well, Satya has a question, which I just found. It's a little lengthy, so you have to bear with me.
All right.
All right. It says, how much hysterics are Lovato splattered about people who don't work, blamefully aimed about various low and no income planetary siblings. A gigantic amount of money goes to others who do not work among the investor class, a signature of the continuation of the slave economic environment. Could Carl or David produce economic models, perhaps for an industry where passive investors are paid last, the people who do the work are rewarded first, as co-workers, owners, windfalls go to the worker owners first, with an environment that also encourages automation and AI for escalations in productivity and profitability?
Thanks. Well, a lot there, but let me say it this
Very.
way: is I will answer it this way: is you can, if you want to give the people at the bottom a lot of help, it would be nice if you could, somehow force corporations to pay them a lot more. But it's unlikely that that's going to happen. You're not going to be able to get that. They're just not going to ever get there on the wage side. If you want to help a large number of people, you're going to have to tax rich people to buy stuff buy healthcare or buy education, sort of the ACA, much on steroids, much expanded, or paying off student loans or what have you. So that's called redistribution. The other part, trying to get pay higher for everybody, is sometimes called pre-distribution. Pre-distribution is not going to happen, and it's not going to get us there. You just have to come up with politicians that will raise taxes on the rich and redistribute the money if you really want to help the middle class in a meaningful way, sort of get to that next level of financial security and comfort. If you wanted to pay much more generous Social Security to poorer retirees, if you wanted to get rid of student loans and pay for tuition, pay for childcare, daycare, that's all redistribution And then you don't have to get into heavily regulating industries and everything else. You don't have to figure all that out. You just have to figure out the taxes and the payments. And it's like Social Security or the ACA, where they've put laws in to take money from some people, give it to others. In this case, you got to find a way to take it from the rich people that have got a tremendous amount of assets and give it to poor people. So I'll answer the question that way: is redistribution is the strategy. The question is, how do you get enough Democrats and progressives to do that? So let me continue. We're almost done.
Okay.
So the policy changes that are driving the debt increases in the U.S., people are always complaining about the national debt. Where did it come from? And so this is a really good graphic, I think, from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which is not liberal by any stretch of the imagination. These guys are very centrist. You could argue they're a little bit right-leaning in some ways, but major tax cuts is the largest bucket of why we have debt. Wars, the discretionary spending increases, is mostly defense. So it's the wars that we had. And this is where that national debt has come from. The Medicare expansions, not a big deal. Recession responses recently because of the pandemic was a big deal, obviously. But it's the tax cuts. And if you get into wars, you're going to be spending crazy amounts of money. So if you reverse a lot of this, your deficit and debt becomes less of an issue. So that's just to be clear when people say we've got a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Republicans love to say that. It's a war spending problem and a major tax cut problem. That's a way to look at it. And when you have recessions, that's another one. And as Carl and I have said many times, 10 of the last 11 recessions started under Republican presidents. So if you don't want debt and deficits, hire Democratic presidents and hopefully avoid the recession piece. But in this case, the COVID was not easily avoided. We could have done better, but we would have still had pretty large stimulus payments. But this blue line has gotten bigger, and that's because we had recessions in 07, 08. It took a while to get out of there. So this is one way of analyzing the data. And I don't think we included this last month, but if I did, I apologize for talking about it twice. But one of the questions came up is, help me make arguments about the national debt. I don't know how to argue this out with people. And here is a lot of the typical conservative claims that I think are mostly bogus. They may be factual, but they're not important. And then the counter argument over here on the side. And so let's go through a few of them. So one of the big issues people have is that debt, you think of your household as debt is bad. You don't want to be in debt. And so you think that the government is like a household, and you shouldn't, because government debt is household private sector assets, and government interest payments to bondholders are payments to private citizens that own those bonds. If you have a pension, then you are the investments that are generating all that income, a lot of treasury bills and bonds, that is money that you're getting. So first one, don't think that like a household. Don't think it's not the same. Interest payments are a cost taxpayers must pay. Well, they're also income to the private sector. Interest payments crowd out other spending. That is just not true. The government can authorize whatever spending. It is not fixed. Deficits are bad for a household, so they must be bad for the government. Not true. When the government is running a deficit, it is injecting money into the private sector, making the private sector richer. You can't pass, it's not fair to pass debt to the next generation. So an intergenerational equity argument. Our 3-year-olds are not benefiting from our extravagant lifestyle, and therefore, it's not fair to them. Well, when this generation dies, assuming it has a debt, it will pass that debt on. It must also pass the assets. You cannot pass the government debt without passing the assets to the next generation. So it's a wealth inequality issue, which is a problem. But it's a different issue. It is not a deficit problem. It's a problem of the rich have too much money. We need to tax them. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. I just talked about that. You can make the opposite claim. And one of my favorite quotes from Christopher Hitchens, the late Christopher Hitchens, Claims made without evidence may be refuted without evidence. Somebody just says this shit, pardon me, you can respond, no, we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. And it's the same. They don't have a better argument than you. Paying down the debt means we must cut spending. No, there is plenty of money that the rich have, and I'll show you that slide in a minute. You guys always see it, I always talk about it. And the government can go bankrupt. It can't. Not the federal government that prints dollars. The government can pay any obligation that it needs to. It doesn't need the money in advance. It can conjure the money. The risk is that you could have inflation or an interest rate spiral, meaning investors are demanding higher interest rates. But again, if that were the case, if there are millions and millions of voters suffering because of high inflation caused by debt, then they will vote to tax the rich, to pay it down. So it's just a lot of the fear mongering and worry about the debt is just noise. And I see these claims made all the time. They're easily diffused, and just the media, again, they love everything's a crisis to them. And so they're not going to help diffuse that. But that's the nature of it, is that you just don't need to worry about it. And if we do get into this scenario down here, where we got much higher inflation, much higher interest rates because of the national debt and not because Trump is doing something stupid, then we will have that opportunity. There will be a real crisis where voters can vote the way to address it. I don't think they're going to vote to cut the spending. They're not going to cut Medicare and Social Security. They will vote to tax rich people. And the rich people have the money. You guys, I show this slide every month because it serves many purposes. The top 10% have 120 trillion net worth, about 70% of it. There's 175 trillion household net worth, about 40 trillion national debt. The data on net worth lags about 3 months. We'll get it at the end of June, so I'm still on the fourth quarter, but it's not significantly different. Maybe this one may have actually outgrown this one, grown a little faster because the stock market has done very well lately in the last couple of months. So if we get into trouble, we can tax the rich. If we can't do a net worth tax, we can tax them on everything else. We can tax their income, the estates, everything else. There's a constitutional question about, can you tax net worth? We tax real estate at the state level all the time, and nobody seems to have a problem with it, but it seems to be a problem at the federal level. If that's the case, then you can eliminate the tax expenditures. As I talked about earlier, there's a tremendous amount of money there, $1 trillion a year almost, which would make almost any deficit issue we face just not a problem anymore. I've got some slides here on tariffs, but we kind of covered that already in many presentations. So what's happening is, because the tariffs are the Supreme Court has weighed in and tried to cancel some of them. There's some other battles going on over tariffs. There's refunds going on. The numbers are getting confusing, which is why I like that personal savings way of analyzing it. Using that 2,650 number is a great number. Whether we break it out by tariffs or this, we know what's going on in the economy writ large. We don't have to separate it. But the latest estimate from the Yale Budget Lab, which is where I go to for this kind of stuff, they update it all the time. Every time there's a change in the situation, it's about $1,000 per household is what they're estimating, a little higher maybe, depending on what happens with the tariffs. There's a lot of uncertainty around that. Here's the current tariff situation. The first row talks about the Supreme Court piece, which has been struck down, and those refunds are starting to get paid. But the other sections, we'll see what happens there. And a lot of these things are still in effect, and Trump is trying to replace the lost money on the first row here using these other authorities. And he'll probably have some success with it. I would not expect gigantic amounts of relief on this, but the number from the Yale Budget Lab used to be more like 2,000 or 2,500, and now it's about 1,000 or 1,500 less than that. And here's the distribution. Tariffs on the left side is the percent of income. And again, they're using different assumptions, so I wouldn't get hung up on that. The idea is that the line, when you're in the, we're showing as a district, when you're in that first decile, so this is the poorest group here, 10th of the population, it takes about 2% of these tariffs are taking somewhere between 1.25% and 2% of your income. And then it goes less as you get to the top, because people up here are spending, you're spending on essential goods here. You're spending on services and other things that are not tariffed. as you get richer. And here's the dollars over on this side. Even though it's more dollars for the rich people, it's a lower percent. It's hitting percent-wise, it's hitting harder because these people at the bottom don't have much money. This group does. So more dollars, lower percent for the rich people. And last thing we'll cover is just what's been happening, even though we have this inequality problem, particularly bad on the wealth side, what's been happening over the last 50 years or so is that Americans are getting richer. Meaning, adjusted for inflation, there are more people making over $100,000 than there were ever in the past. So back in 1967, only 13% of the population made over 100,000 in today's dollars, meaning their salaries have been grossed up, into current dollars. So whatever they were making in 1967 has been multiplied several times to make this an apples to apples comparison. So 13% of the people made over 100,000 in today's dollars back in 1967. Now it's 37.5%. The middle income is getting squeezed. It used to be 54% were making between 35 and 100. Now it's 39. And in the low income, it used to be 32 and now it's 23. So both of these groups have been moving. Some of this bottom group went into the middle, some of this middle group went into the top. But you're seeing a more affluent country where more people are making over 100,000 than ever in the past. Again, adjusted, so everybody's on the same, adjusted for inflation. I'm going to show you the same idea in a couple of other charts, but it's the same thing. This is the households making less than 50 grand, and this is how the number has fallen. Here's 50 to 99, that number has fallen. But on the bottom, 100 to 199, that's doubled. And then here, the 200,000 plus has gone up by a factor of 8, but it was small before, 2% to 16. So this number used to be, if you add the 13 and the 2, used to have 15% or so making over 100, and now you've got 27 and 16. That's the 42 or 37 and a half here, different sources showing it. This chart was through 2022. This one's through 2024. So that's why the numbers are a little different. But, it just tells you that America is becoming more affluent generally. Went the wrong way there. And then this is just the last table, just shows you, again, the shares kind of next to each other. So you can see the less than 50 grand or 50 to 100, smaller chunk of the population in those, but about 14% increase in this bucket. And these are the old and the new. So good news there generally. So when you talk about income inequality, even if the inequality is getting worse, in some cases, just keep in mind that everybody's getting richer. Everybody's making more income in the different groups, not every single household, but I mean, the even adjusted for inflation, America is much better off. And I didn't share it in this presentation, but the real median household income is a great measure of how the middle class is doing. And that number was at a record level in 2024 under Biden. And we'll see if it is again in 2025. There's probably a pretty good chance that it would be. They report that data late. So we get the 2025 data in September. Sadly, it was too late for Biden. We didn't get the 2024 number until September of 2025, but it was at a record level. And I think that is it. So we've shared these action slides before. There's plenty of places you can donate. You can always write your congressman and senator. They have emails for that purpose that take 2 seconds to tell them what you want to tell them. And you've got plenty of places to donate as well. The Act Blue gives you sort of a clearinghouse of locations to donate. So we will stop our prepared remarks there and open it up for any general questions and commentary. We can open up the lines, and if we've got some questions, Debbie, we can answer those first, I guess, if people have written them.
Yeah, I do have a couple. I have a couple for you, so I'll give you a moment here. All right, Jeannie had a question from before, and it says, for working families, how are costs such as daycare insurance, college loan debt, car loan debt, and medical debt, etc., factored into the cost of living? So all of these things are factored into inflation?
So it is yes and no. The interest costs on your credit card, if the credit credit card interest is not part of inflation. So if interest rates have been going up and you're paying more on your credit card, that isn't covered in inflation. If you are, if your mortgage is a flexible rate mortgage for some reason, if you get hit with an arm, if you've got an arm that has expired and you've got to go back and get a mortgage at a higher rate, that's not going to be in there. Medical costs are in inflation, so medical debt should be, I mean, more or less in there. But yeah, I mean, it's for some people, it's very hard to get by. And we've talked about this, and there's a lot of people angry about affordability. It's a big thing in the news. We've shared slides that tell you that in general, things are pretty good. From an income standpoint, the real wage is near a record level. That's that. And then Carl shared that slide I love from the CBO, which is every quartile was better off in 2023 than 2019, despite inflation. And I can tell you, Republicans will go to their graves saying 2019 was the best year ever. CBO is telling us that 2023 under Biden was better, even with inflation, because incomes went up so much. And also a lot of households got a ton of money in those stimulus payments. I mean, you know, the $10,000, $15,000 is not out of the realm of reason for a lot of families that had several kids. If you had 2 kids and both the adults were not making over the threshold because above a certain level you weren't getting the stimulus, the people that were maxing that out were getting $10,000 or $15,000 from all the things that were happening, and many of them kept their jobs. Their lives didn't change, and here they are with the extra money. So but again, that CBO piece talks about it in some detail. I would encourage everybody to read that. You'll be surprised because the media narrative was so negative. And that CBO report got buried. Nobody wanted to talk about it because the media would have looked really stupid and they didn't want to share it. They didn't want to admit that, wow, we've been kind of lying to everybody, that things are pretty good. I mean, there's a reason why, despite people saying we're going into recession over and over and over again under Biden, that we never did, you know, and it's because there is a ton of income out there. 2022 was a terrible stock market year, but 2020, during the pandemic, there was the drop initially, and then we got it back pretty quickly. And then the stock market has basically doubled since 2019, a little more than that now. So households that are lucky enough to have a significant chunk of stock, which is mostly older people, if you've been working for a long time and your 401k is pretty good, you're seeing you've gotten a giant windfall in the last 5 years. So there's a lot of household finance stuff looks really good, even though the labor market is kind of meh right now. It's sort of flat. Again, the last 3 months have been good, but last year was flat. So yeah, I don't have we've been arguing over this the affordability issue for a few months now, and I'm just saying that the data looks pretty good. Yes, there are some people left behind, and it stinks. But the media negativity is just, and I even shared that that latest Fed report that showed that people's own finances are perceived to be pretty good, but they don't think the rest of the economy is good, and that is, how do they know? You know, I don't know that. I study the numbers, but it doesn't tell me I know how every other person in America is doing, you know, but in general, there's that big disconnect there. So anyway, other questions?
Yep. One more question for you. From Joe, it says, when will we realize the pie cannot get bigger forever, or what would it take?
The pie can get bigger forever. And they'll figure out how to get to Mars if we need to make the pie bigger, I suspect, or the moon. But no, the pie should be able to keep growing. And the question is, what are we going to do if the rich keep getting a bigger and bigger slice of it? Obviously, there was lots of news. We'll cover it probably next month about, you know, Elon Musk now has $1 trillion approximately. Yes. And he donated 300 million or whatever, 250 million to the last election to help Republicans. That kind of violates the idea of one person, one vote idea, I think, pretty significantly. So people say, what's wrong with trillionaires? they earn the money, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yeah, if they stayed out of politics, but they don't. But think of it this way. I showed you that chart before. The bottom 50% in the US have 4 trillion net worth. So bottom 50% households, 4 trillion net worth. Elon Musk, one household. Well, maybe not one, because he has all these love children all over the place where he subsidizes the women to have his kids, but he maybe has 15 households, let's say. It's not 50% of the US, right? So good for him. If I had $1 trillion, I can't say I'd be a better person than that, but you never know. I hope my mom raised me better, but my wife would certainly kill me. I would be giving up that trillion very quickly if I had 15 love children in different parts of the country. I would be in the news as deceased. But it's there's $1 trillion. He's got $1 trillion versus 4 for the bottom 50% of the country. It's insane. And we're still arguing over whether he should be taxed more. Republicans don't want to tax him anymore. It's ridiculous. It's insane. Completely insane.
Right. One other question I found before we go to Bill and Jeannie.
Yes.
Are we the only nation, is this from Satya, are we the only nation that borrows money from banksters?
From banksters?
Yeah, banksters.
Gangsters or banksters?
Banksters. Well, I don't know. Some that might be.
That's a good term. I like that. I might have to check the definitions of that. But again, I wouldn't worry about the national debt. I just wouldn't. I mean, there's a lot of ink spilled over it. You can worry about it if you want. I'm just saying I've given you the data and the arguments. That is not a top issue we need to be worried about. And, it comes back to the bottom line is how much redistribution are we going to do? Because we're not going to make the real wage double all of a sudden for people. It's the highest about roughly that it's ever been in terms of when you adjust for inflation. We showed you that chart. It's not going to get you there. You're not going to make everybody happy getting their wage 10 or 20% more. If you doubled wages, you're going to double prices because people are just going to, once they realize everybody's got money, they're just going to raise the prices. So you're not going to have a big increase in real wages or real purchasing power from here. And the one idea of the Trumps that I really did like was the idea of giving newborns a dose of the stock market. It should be more than it is, and it's relatively inexpensive to do it. But that's one way of getting people to share in the economy that isn't redistribution. Assuming you don't, well, it is redistribution in a way in that you're taxing somebody to build those accounts, but it's not a lot of redistribution. But to pay for college, you're looking at 100 and something billion a year. To pay off student loan debt is $1.6 trillion, $1.7 trillion or so, and we did that twice for the pandemic. We did $2 trillion stimuluses for the pandemic, and then we decided not to do that one. But Biden was still able to get about 100, I don't know what the latest number is, 160, was it 180, something like that. Let's call it 200 billion for a round number, 200 billion in student loan forgiveness during his term. That seems to be holding up in court, that part. So it's redistribution, and you have to elect progressives that are going to do that. And one of the things I'm nervous about in the next few years is because a lot of Democrats, in order to get elected in some of these redder states, are going to have to act like Bush Republicans. And it's going to be harder to get the kind of progressive stuff done unless you have a real crisis, where we're going to have a crisis with Social Security, where it's going to get cut 20% if we don't do something. And so we're getting there. That's 2032 is the latest report that just came out, I think, from the trustees. There's no way, as we've talked about, that we're going to get a 20% cut in Social Security. But if we were to we were going to toe that line, people are going to have to make a decision about who's going to get taxed more. And the obvious answer is to tax the rich people because they got the money. But politics being what they are, you could wind up with something where everybody winds up just contributing more to Social Security. But that would be a very suboptimal choice. We could remove the cap and cover 60% of the shortfall, which hits the top 6% of wage earners and has a host of other good effects. Cuts back inflation a little bit because the people doing all the spending, the rich people, instead are forced to save it. It would reverse some of that savings rate, that savings decline. There's a host of things. There are a host of really good reasons to remove the cap without making benefits more generous. Just remove it and throw all that money into the trust fund. So we'll see if reason prevails, but a lot of Democrats to get elected are going to have to act like old school Republicans and maybe a little more socially conservative than we would like. They may be economically liberal like we like, but they may have to act socially conservative for a while, and we may have to hold our nose and deal with that. That's part of the Trump stain on this country. So we got questions? Sorry.
We have Bill with his hand up.
Go for it, Bill.
Question to you, you and Carl. On those charts that you had on the changes of income, and those were household. So it's a household defined as husband and wife or a married partner filing jointly, or is it defined as how many people are actually living in that house?
That's a good question. Carl may know the answer to that. What I would say is it's a household which averages like 2-point-something people in the US. There's 131 million households, and we've got 330 or 40 million people. So
Right.
It's like 3-ish per household is the average. Now, there are single person households. There are households with 10 people in them. Some people like Elon Musk maybe have 12 households, but in general, the household is a family unit, whether that's I should say family unit. It's one person or two or three or whatever. But I think to your point, Bill, usually when the CBO does it, it's tax units. It's who's filing together.
So the reason for that question was I was reading an article today about we have an unprecedented number of families where both husband and wife or spouse and partner are both working. And I was wondering if when the kids come back and they move back in, they don't have enough for their own house, do they become part of that? And so I was wondering if the number of people working in that household has increased, that may be impacting that move up in those income levels per household.
That's a good question, and I'm going to have to analyze that, Bill. I will do that. I don't know the answer, and I'm not sure how BLS defines the household. I'm familiar with the CBO definition they use in their income inequality reports is the taxable unit. But the BLS may do it differently based on their surveys of how they ask people who's living there. Now, if kids move back into a house, that should still be one household. It should be one, but that's kind of confusing if the kids are filing their taxes separately from their parents. At least under the CBO definition, they would be a separate household. They're a separate tax unit. So, yeah, that's. Let me dig into that one and see what I can find.
Okay. We have Jeannie with her hand up. All right, Jeannie, if you'd like to unmute.
Please forgive me. Y'all have worked so wonderfully and have worked so hard, but I do agree that probably a lot of the the ideas that we draw about how other people are doing financially we get from the news media. Would you add to maybe next month's presentation a little summary of the bankruptcies that I keep reading about all the brick and mortar that are collapsing, and all the the farmers that are losing their farm. You just keep reading all these stories, but to maybe see for the last 10 years if there really is any difference, or if the numbers have remained the same like for so many other things.
Sure. Yeah, we can look into that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. All right, Shannon.
Hi, thank you. Hey, David, I was wondering, so you said that the government can conjure the money and will never, ever, ever go bankrupt.
Right.
So that would mean that when we deposit our Social Security checks, that too is deposited. They keep a record. The trust fund is just a record of how much we have contributed. And that money is just deposited into the Treasury General account. And it goes where all money that goes into the Federal Reserve goes. And that means that when our Social Security checks are paid, they are paid directly from checks drafted on the Treasury General account. And the only way that the trust fund is used, it's used to calculate the contribution. It's used to calculate the benefits based on the contributions. So there's not any.
Let me pause you there for a second. I get confused when we get into the plumbing of the government in terms of which account it's in, the Treasury operating account. And modern monetary theory people get really into that. I mean, the thing is, if the government passes a law that says we are going to pay $2 million, we're going to pay X dollars to these people, that will happen. The government can't say we're out of money, we can't do it. The law has been passed. The Fed and the Treasury will figure it out, and they will conjure the money and pay that obligation. The risk is, so the government will never run out of money, can always pay off the bondholder. The question is, are you going to get inflation or an interest rate spiral? In which case I covered that, which is that you would, if you did get a real crisis going on like that, you would be forced the government would either cut spending or it would tax the rich people because the poor people don't have enough money. The bottom 50% only have 4 trillion net worth. They don't have enough money to cover a major national debt problem. It's the rich people that do. So, but now on the Social Security, hang on a second, on the Social Security Trust Fund, every dollar that gets contributed is recorded in the trust fund. And that is an obligation of the government to the Social Security recipients. And every dollar that goes into the trust fund by law must eventually be paid out. And so whether they keep it in a lockbox, that was a big issue years and years ago, it doesn't matter. The government has a legal obligation to pay Social Security recipients. The problem is that in 2032 or so, and that year will vary plus or minus 1, but in general, in the early 2030s, the trust fund will be gone. And because over the next few years, we're paying out more than is being paid in, that will take the 3 trillion-ish trust fund down to 0. And then you will see the benefits get cut about 20%. So the question is, are seniors, are any politicians willing to cut Social Security 20%? The answer is there's no way. And
But we don't need to.
So what's that?
But based on what you just said, we don't need to. It's not money. It's records of what the government is committed to. But it's not even committed to. I mean, I think like Biden was trying to show us that it's not an amount because he like arbitrarily changed the amounts. It's like he did it like 3 times in a row just to say to the people, look, there were some
tweaks in it. Yeah,
But the point is, those tweaks are evidence that we should be taking note of, that all that contribution counts for is an algorithm for calculating benefits. In fact, they don't even need to take those contributions. We could just send them how much we've made, and they could just
legally, the Congress has to change the law, or the benefits will get cut 20%. And so if Congress does change the law and say, we aren't going to have this, we're not going to restrict ourselves to the payroll tax revenue that's coming in that is dedicated to the program. We are going to take money from the general fund and just pay the Social Security obligations as if the money was coming in through payroll taxes. The government can do that, but it needs to create a new law to do that. There's no real restriction. You're exactly right. The government,
it's not based on taxes either. It's just conjured. You just said it's conjured.
But the
It's
law,
conjured.
you can conjure it, but you need to write a law to conjure it. That's the problem. If you just leave the law as it is, those benefits will get cut 20%. They need to create a new law that would say, here's how we're going to pay Social Security, whatever that gap is, or whatever the new rules are. They need to create new legislation. And this is why Republicans will have a lot of leverage here, I think, because if they do nothing, if they block something, you know, the filibuster in the Senate, you could block that, but politically it's suicide for them to try to cut Social Security. They're just not going to do it. But to your point, you're exactly right. The government can conjure the money, but to pay, they need a law. Congress has to pass a law or change the Social Security law to use funds that are not the payroll taxes to pay. And they can do that very easily. There's no limit. They just have to do it. And you know, we're gonna see it in the next. It's not that far out now. And in the next 10 years, and not 10, 8, 6, probably in the next 6 years, we're gonna see a giant national debate about Social Security. The best way to fund it. So, but you're right. The government is not limited. There's no problem funding it. They can fund it very easily. They just need to pass a law to do it.
Okay, that
Anything
was
else?
our last hand raise.
All right, good. We made it to 9:21. 34 diehard people stayed on the whole thing. That's pretty good. So I think
Thank
let's
you
wrap
all
it up
who
here.
stayed, and thanks
Is
everybody
that a
who
record
attended.
for you?
No, we've had some crazy people. When there's a lot of drama in the news, we'll get up to 120 people on this call, but that's unusual. Usually something crazy is happening. We used to have like 10 people, 10 or 15 really crazy people that were on this call, and then with Trump, it goes up like crazy because he's doing all this crazy stuff, and people want to hear about it and vent about it. So we get more participation. So kind of like the media gets more eyeballs, we get more eyeballs too when Trump is doing crazy stuff. Sad but true. He's good for all forms of media. So, all right.
Indigestion too.
Yeah, right. Carl, do you want to give the word there? I heard you start to do it.
Yes.
No, basically want to thank everybody for coming. Our next meeting will be the third Tuesday in July, which I'll check my calendar here. That will be July 21st. And hopefully we'll see all of you and many more joining us then. And hopefully we'll have good economic news by then. We'll have figured out what, if anything, got settled in Iran, US,
Right.
Israel,
Yep.
and whether or not gas prices continue to go down, whether they go back up.
We could have negative inflation for a couple months. If the gas prices fall enough, we could see it in the next 6 months. A couple of those months could be negative. We'll see.
True. Yeah. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yep.
And whether we get enough of the stimulus from the World Cup to keep jobs growing, or whether the end of the World Cup in another month or two tends to see a crash in the hospitality jobs.
And I should add, you guys can always save the chat. If you go into the upper right, if you're in the chat, go into the upper right corner, there's 3 little dots there. You click on those and you say save chat. And then there will be a little message that shows up toward the bottom of the chat that says, you know, show me where it is. It goes into some kind of directory on your computer, and you'll be able to find it. But that's how you do it. So you'll have the full record.
It does depend on your device too, David.
Yes, if you're on your phone, I don't know what happens there, but if you're on a computer or PC, you will be able to save the chat. So, all right. Thank you, guys.
All right.
All right.
Any
Good
last
night, everybody.
words?